All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Marianne Juarez. I'd like to welcome you all to the compensation and benefits session. Just as a reminder, please feel free to post any questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can after the talk. With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Emerald Light, Assistant Vice Provost of Academic Affairs. Emerald, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I need to share my screen here. Marianne, have you turned over screen share to me? Great. Thank you. All right. So today we're going to talk about faculty compensation and benefits. And I just want to let everyone know that this presentation will be available on our website. So for anyone who wants to go back and look at the slides at a later date, we will post this presentation in its entirety on our website, which is facultyacademicaffairs.ucsf.edu. So we're going to start off talking about the Health Sciences Compensation Plan, commonly referred to as the comp plan. So the compensation plan, HSCP, is something that is mandated by the UC Office of the President, or UCOP, for all health sciences campuses. It provides the basic framework for school and department details. It represents an agreement between the university, the department, and the faculty member. It outlines the department's or school's expectations of the faculty member and the department school's commitment to the faculty member. So it goes both ways. There are four key areas of the comp plan. There's membership, there's compensation, there's benefits, and there's an appeals process. So let's talk about membership first. So membership is not based on your rank or your series. It is generally for faculty who are appointed at greater than 50% effort. And there are exceptions to that 50% effort rule for faculty who are at affiliated sites under a formal affiliation agreement. And those examples are the VAMC and Gladstone. We also have a number of others, HHMI. The comp plan is made up of salary scales based on your department or your school. And compensation also includes incentives. And we're going to go over how they are, what incentives are, how they're earned, calculated, and who is eligible. The compensation plan also outlines how outside professional activities may be earned and may be retained or must be turned over to the plan. So each plan has to outline the thresholds for the maximum number of days, the maximum number of dollars that are received, and the types of outside professional activities in which you can participate. So there are restrictions to the types of outside professional activities in which you can participate. And in order to be able to participate in any outside professional activities, you must be in what is considered good standing, which is defined by your plan. Sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty. What's happening? Let's continue with outside professional activities. So types of outside professional activities are income from occasional service. So certain types of income that can be retained by faculty members. Examples include honoraria, royalties, prizes. There are also certain types of activities for which the income from those activities must be required to be deposited directly into the plan. And those activities include consulting and expert witness fees, And in some of those cases, monies from those activities will be returned to the faculty member after certain fees are retained from the department. Now, patient care activities must be provided within the university setting or as part of what we call an approved affiliation agreement or PSA, professional service agreement. So all clinical income is due to the plan. In no case can a plan participant be allowed to retain income from patient care services. There are also some activities you may be required to get pre-approval for before engaging in such activities. And examples of these include assuming a founding role in a company or employment outside of the university. And these are what we call Category 1 activities. Each year, you will be required to submit a report of all of your professional activities in which you engaged. And this is called an annual certification. And you're actually required to report this annual certification, even if you do not engage in any activities. So you'll be required to actually certify that you didn't participate in any outside professional activities. Now, we have a system that allows you to report these activities online now, and that outside activity tracking system is called OATS. And you can get more information about the tracking system online at our website, and we've provided a link here. So the comp plan also includes benefits that you will be provided as a member. And these benefits, one of the benefits that are available will fall into categories of leaves of absences. And these are distinct from other types of leaves that you're eligible for under just as a member of being a member of the faculty, such as academic leaves like sabbatical leaves or professional development leave. So the leaves of absences that provide benefits under the HSCP, these are what we would call personal leaves and things like childbearing, child rearing, or extended illness. And these are paid supplemental pay buckets of leave that will cover times that you need to be away to care for a child or for your own personal health illness. Childbearing and child rearing leave are currently 12 weeks for all compensation plans, but extended illness is going to vary depending on your individual compensation plan. So you'll want to check your plan to find out what that particular benefit is. The appeal process, again, is the next category of the HSCP, and each school has an HSCP advisory committee with broad representation across the departments, across series, and across disciplines. Committee members are elected and appointed by the dean, and their role is to assist the dean in resolving issues that might arise from implementing the compensation plan. The committee will also review faculty appeals as a result of a determination of a loss of good standing. So we want to encourage everyone to review their compensation plan document. Each department or school, if you are in a school that has a single compensation plan, you'll have a school-wide compensation plan. And all faculty have access to this document. If you were not provided a copy of this document at the time that you were onboarded, you should make sure that you receive a copy or go to your school and ask them to provide you with a copy. Be sure that you review it and make sure that you understand the terms and conditions. Ask questions if you don't understand the terms and conditions. If there's something particularly confusing or something that you want to find out more information about, there are good resources within your department. The people that you might want to reach out to are your department manager, maybe your chief administrative officer, or your manager of academic affairs or academic HR shared services within HR are also great resources for questions concerning your compensation plan. So now we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the actual components of pay, or the ABCs of compensation, or rather the X, Y, and the Z. So first, let's look at the salary structure. So how is salary for faculty structured? So the first component of pay is what we call the base salary. And the base salary for faculty in the compensation plan starts with the X and the X prime. Then we add on an additional compensation, which is the Y component of pay. The two together, the base salary and the Y component of pay, is the total negotiated salary. The total negotiated salary can also include a Z payment, which can be an incentive or a bonus. And all of these components together will be your total income or total compensation. Again, base salary represents the minimum salary rate for a faculty member in a department, and it's the two components, and we'll talk about the scales in a moment. It is the component that is scale 0 or the X, and what's called the X prime, which is a differential between scale 0 and what is assigned to your HSCP salary scale, depending on your comp plan. It's associated with your rank and step, but not your series. And again, it's driven by the compensation plan salary scales. The X is covered by the UCRP retirement plan up to the amount permissible by law and in accordance with the UCRP provisions and regulations. So here's an example. Using the 2021, which are effective 10-1 salary scales, if someone is an assistant professor 1 on scale 3, their base salary will be $102,700 for the year. The components of pay for X and X prime, the X or scale 0 would be $79,000. The differential for the X prime is $23,700. The combined total is that $102,700. So this is probably already confusing. So we're gonna keep going and we'll revisit this in a different way. First thing we're going to do is actually look at the table. So when you're saying, well, what are all of these scales? Why are you talking to me about scale 3? So table 5, this is the HSCP compensation plan salary scale. Again, talking about 10-1-2021. And as you can see, as we go down the list, on the column on the left, we have the ranks. All of the assistant professor steps, then the associate professor steps, then the professor steps. And then as we go across from the left to the right, you will see scale 0, scale 1, scale 2, all the way up to scale 9. So anyone in a health sciences compensation plan is on a scale between 1 and at UCSF, I believe the highest scale we have right now is maybe 7. Don't quote me on that. But you're going to fall somewhere in one of these scales. So you're going to go from whatever your rank and step is. At scale 0, that's going to be your X. And then you're going to look at what your compensation plan is on, and then scroll over to what that scale is to find your actual base salary. Shown another way, we can look at the differential. This table actually shows what the difference is between scale 0 and what your actual salary scale is. So you can see here we have an assistant. If you look at assistant 1, the base salary, or the X, just the X, is $79,000. If you're on scale 1, the difference is an additional 7,900. As you scale up, if we look at scale 5, for instance, assistant 1, it's a difference of 39,500 per year. If you look at the very bottom, you're going to see something that says APU, salary plan APU, and there are numbers 0 through 9. So again, we have another term that references the scales. The numbers match the number of the scale, but now we have another term called APU, and we'll get to that in a moment. So what's covered in covered compensation? So we talked about the X. We've been talking about scales. Everything in the scales is covered compensation, whether it's the scale 0 or the scale 3, whether it's the X or the X prime, all of it is covered compensation. And covered compensation means it's used for your retirement calculations. It's used for your benefits calculations. It's used for UC life insurance. It's used for UC disability. And a little note about disability and life. There are some schools that may have a life or disability insurance on the Y portion of your salary, but that would be through your school. So generally speaking, when we're talking about life insurance coverage and disability insurance coverage that are UC plans, we're talking about the portion that's for covered compensation on your base salary. So remember when I talked about the APU and the scales and the numbers were the same? Well, the term APU actually comes from Academic Programmatic Unit. And this is how we tie what scale you're on to who you are and what you do as a faculty member. So how does a department determine what scale they're going to be on or what scale an individual faculty member is going to be on? So some departments may have many different scales that they utilize. And in that case, we define them as academic programmatic units within the compensation plan. And they're not random. They are devised to define faculty in groups as they're composed with similar clinical, teaching, and research responsibilities. So the characteristics of the group, types of teaching, potential for income, are used to determine the salary scale upon which that group's members will receive that additional base or X prime to be calculated into their salary. So all members of an APU will share the same salary scale. So the table below demonstrates how individual departments might differentiate between different groups of faculty on different scales using different APUs because of the different types of activities that drive the differences in pay. So as you notice, if we look at the table and we have one department has everyone on scale 3. If you look at department B, they are utilizing 2 scales because they have 2 academic programmatic units. They have defined folks who have clinical activities and folks who do not have clinical activities. And you'll notice that those with clinical activities are on scale 4 and those without are on scale 1. So why isn't my department on scale 10? Why aren't we all just making the most of the scales? Departments with limited revenue will not have enough money to fund a higher covered compensation because covered compensation is supported by departmental income and taxes. So now let's look at why. The additional negotiated salary. Will be negotiated with the department chair and or the division or chief of service annually, depending on your department. It is not covered compensation by the UC retirement plan. And how it will differ will be based on such factors as the quality, the scope, volume of the faculty members teaching, research, including grants and monies that are brought in from other entities, clinical and administrative activities, as well as availability of reliable sources of income. You can only negotiate your Y salary one time per year. So we do not allow mid-year renegotiation of the Y unless you obtain vice provost's approval. And these approvals are usually limited to when there is a new position or a retention. The third component of pay is the Z. And the Z is not covered compensation either. It is commonly referred to when it is part of a departmental incentive program. They will typically refer to it as Z payments. And in those cases, these are generally part of clinical productivity programs. They're often processed as supplemental paychecks on a set schedule, often quarterly, and are based on clinical revenue that a clinician is bringing in to a service. There are also administrative incentives, and these are typically for things that are done administratively, additional roles that are taken on. Things like residency directors or other administrative leadership roles. And these are typically paid monthly as part of your regular paycheck. So what causes changes to total salary? So changes to total salary can sometimes happen when there is a change to base salary, but that's not a guarantee. It may or may not change total salary. For example, range adjustments that affect scale changes may or may not change total salary, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Advancements, because advancements affect X only, and that's based on rank and step. Changes to additional negotiated salary on Y will certainly affect total salary. So when you are annually renegotiating your salary, you will have a change on your total negotiated or your total compensation. However, it could be a positive or a negative change. So a question that we get quite frequently is, why didn't my salary go up when I got a promotion? Or why didn't my salary go up when the scales changed or there was a range adjustment? So we have to remind people that academic advancement and the scales or range adjustments increase just the X and the X prime salary component. It's only based on rank and step. It doesn't guarantee an increase in total compensation. It doesn't affect the Y. So during annual renegotiation, departments will take into account all components of pay, and they may adjust the Y to maintain a fixed rate throughout the year. So when X goes up, Y may go down proportionately. Your school may also have policies that limit increases for scale or range adjustments. We often see this when a range adjustment hits outside of July 1st, or when the renegotiation of salaries generally take place. So if you notice, this year, instead of having a July 1st range adjustment, we had an October 1st range adjustment. For the vast majority of faculty, they renegotiated their total compensation in July. And so when October came around, it was decided that the total compensation would stay the same. And so the X went up, but for most, the Y went down. So let's just look at salary structure once again. X, scale 0, X prime, the difference between scale 0 and your APU or your scale on the HSCP, the differential. That together is your base salary plus your Y, which is your negotiated additional compensation, which not everyone has. Together, that is your total negotiated salary. On top of that, you might have incentive pay, bonus pay, and together that is your total income or compensation. Now we'll look at a quick example. Dr. Lee will be hired as an assistant professor in residence, step 3, in the Department Q on October 1, 2021. Faculty in Department Q are all on scale 4. Dr. Lee's annual salary is $195,000. Dr. Lee receives an additional $10,000 a year for serving as the residency director. So if we were to go back and look at the table that I showed you on the slide, we could quickly go and look up scale 4 for assistant professor 3 and find out that that was $123,000, $123,600. Again, this would be the covered compensation component, or the X plus X prime, the base salary. In addition, he's also receiving a Y component of $71,400, which is not covered compensation, but was negotiated between him and his department for a total of $195,000. And then in addition, he's getting a Z payment for being the residency director of $10,000 per year for a total annual income of $205,000. So let's go to some questions really quickly here that are frequently asked questions, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So where can I get more information about retirement benefits? Because that's definitely something we didn't cover. UCNet is a really good resource. It has all of the information. Where can I get additional information about outside professional activities? Contact your manager, your department manager, your CAO, or visit our OATS website. How do I successfully renegotiate my salary? Please stay tuned for today's afternoon session for tips for faculty success and meet with some of our faculty and chairs. Where can I get information about the home loan programs, faculty recruitment and allowances? Go to our website and we have an entire section on home loan programs. And here are some other resources that we do have available that might be helpful, including where all the policies live and the Faculty Handbook for Success, which is a document the Senate office puts out. And I will now turn it over for questions.
Great. Thank you, Emerald. I know this is a complicated topic, and I really appreciate you sharing all these slides. So we've gotten some great questions from the audience, and some may be a little bit specific. We'll try and kind of focus on some of the general questions and then get a little more specific if we have time. Can you tell us, do these compensation rules apply to all series or only the Senate series?
Yes. So again, it's not series specific. It applies to all series. If you're in the compensation plan, these rules apply to you.
Great. To talk a little more about childbearing leave, one question was, is the 12-week childbearing or child rearing leave a total of 12 consecutive weeks, or is that 60 days that can be taken non-consecutively?
It is consecutive.
And then looking back at the salary scales, why is associate professor step 1 salary lower than an assistant professor step 6?
Yes. This is because assistant professor step 6 is actually what we call a special step and is only used in rare circumstances where someone doesn't promote after assistant professor step 4, in generally speaking. So there is some overlap between the two ranks. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this particular question, but we generally don't use the special steps that much unless we absolutely need to. You don't take a pay cut generally when you get promoted for 2 reasons. One, because again, when we're talking about the X, that doesn't affect your Y. So unless your Y is going down, your total compensation is usually staying the same, even if you're in a special step. But also because it's very rare that people will take that path. In general, we'll try to make sure that people don't take a pay cut.
Great. And then a couple of questions about the Y component. Do you have any data on the proportion of faculty that have a Y component to their salary?
We have data on that in our, the schools have data on that. And I believe our FSCR, our faculty salary equity report, has data on that that's online. Like, don't quote me on that. That's a Brian question probably, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, thanks. And then also pertaining to the Y component, recognizing that it can only be negotiated yearly, is there a specific time that you recommend or a timeline as to when you would renegotiate for the Y?
So all of the departments renegotiate the Y prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. So it's not on an individualized basis. It's part of the normal cycle. But it has to be done before the beginning of the next fiscal year or the end of the current. If you're on a term appointment, it has to be done prior to the beginning of a new appointment.
And are you able to give a few more examples of what people negotiate for in the Y?
I don't understand the question.
So one example would be you could get an additional payment for being a residency director. But
that's not Y. That's Z.
Z, apologies.
Are you asking for Z? Examples of Z?
I think for Y.
So Y is the negotiated piece for things like the kind of work that you do. So based on your specialty. So for things like if you are a specialized surgeon, you might have a larger Y because in your field, that is a more highly compensated type of clinician as opposed to a general practitioner. You might have a higher Y if you are a researcher because you've been given a grant that has a larger component to pay you a higher salary than somebody else because the grant itself is granting you a certain amount of money to be paid on your Y. Does that help? So the Y is not typically just a free for all. It has to have some basis to it. Departments generally have structure built into how they negotiate the Y. And I think that's a really good question for this afternoon session.
Great, thank you. A couple more pertaining to childbearing leave. One participant asked, I thought up to 6 months could be taken for childbearing leave. Is that 3 months paid and 3 months unpaid?
So the comp plan benefit is just a pay. It's just a supplemental pay benefit. It doesn't mean that you can't take additional leave or unpaid leave, if you will. So yes, you can take additional leave if you are eligible for additional leave under either FEMLA, or we have another policy that's the parental leave policy in the APM. So depending on your specific situation, most people are eligible to take somewhere between, depending on whether you're talking about before or after the birth, anywhere between 5 up to maybe even 7-8 months, but it won't be paid. So you can use, people usually supplement with vacation. And then you also have this paid leave bucket. And then in addition to that, we have, unpaid leave options.
And in reference to, I believe this is the paid leave for childbearing leave or vacation benefits, where is that compensation derived from? Example, if your salary is paid by NIH grants, do these benefits get paid from your grants, or is that department?
Yes. Okay. They get paid from the funding source that you're on, unless the funding source prohibits that, but NIH does not prohibit grants from paying childbearing leave.
Great. Regarding the Z bonus, how long does that take to get approved once it's been determined?
The Z is department specific. So it depends on what the structure of the department is, the structure of the department plan is. So what the compensation plan requires for Z is that, so in the school's implementing procedures, what it will say is that each individual compensation plan has to define how Z payments will be structured and paid out. So it should say in your compensation plan something to the effect of how you will be able to earn those and how they will be paid. So like, for instance, whether it will be quarterly or, whether it will be, if you're talking about a bonus structure. But in terms of approved, that's usually negotiated with the department as part of your annual renegotiation or your offer if they're just coming in and you're brand new.
And I think this may be department specific as well. Is it common for providers acting as interim directors to get a Z or bonus payment?
Is it, again, that would be dependent on the individual department. It's not prohibited. And any of these questions, except for the benefits questions, because probably chairs don't know the answers to the leave questions, but any of these questions about Z payments, you definitely could ask the chairs this afternoon, because they're the ones negotiating these and they're the ones who develop these programs. So For instance, the School of Medicine has their own, many of the departments in medicine participate in School of Medicine, or the medical center has some programs where you can receive Z payments for based on clinical revenue. And so you actually participate in that program, and then you get payments based on participation in that program.
Great, thank you. Can you comment on how does UCSF ensure equitable Y and Z payments within the various schools or departments?
So we do, so on many levels. So departments are responsible at the department level for making sure that the APUs have to be sound. Those are reviewed by the schools. They cannot make up their own APUs. They have to be evaluated by the schools and then approved at the campus level. And then beyond that, for like the Y compensation and the other components of pay, we do have something called the FSER, which is the Faculty Salary Equity Review. And that is a campus-wide project that's done every couple of years to ensure that there's equity. And so all of the components of pay for all of the schools and all of the faculty are evaluated, and any outliers, anomalies are addressed, and the schools have to dive into those individual outliers and make sure that there isn't inequities. It's somewhat of an audit process.
Thank you. And then one person, I know that you mentioned this, but I missed it. Is the Y counted in disability and life insurance coverage?
No, not unless you are a member of a school that has a school level program. So I think medicine and dentistry might. You would have to check with the schools, but the university itself does not have a program.
And this may be a little more specific as well. Can you briefly explain the mortgage origination program? Does it guarantee pre-approval for mortgage or just lower financing interest rates?
So the mortgage origination program, or the MOP loan, is a program where you get an actual loan directly from the university. And yes, it does have its own rates. Sometimes the rates are lower than what's on the commercial market, not always. So you definitely want to compare rates. I'm not sure that answered the question. If you want to repeat the question, I definitely wouldn't. I'm not going to go into depth about that program because it's very, I'm not an expert on it. We do have an expert in our office, and I would encourage anyone who has very specific questions about that program to contact Wilson Hardcastle, who is the expert in our office on that program.
Great, thank you. One question referring to private practice. I wanted to know how things work if a clinician has their own private practice. So not necessarily a consulting group, but not affiliated with any organization or education institute, and how that might be reported.
If you have a private practice, and I'm assuming by private practice, you mean a clinical private practice, then you cannot be a member of the comp plan, which means that you cannot receive any Y compensation or X prime differential. So you must be on scale 0, and you must be less than 50%. You must be 50% or less paid by the university. If we go back to the slide where I showed that you can't receive any clinical income outside of the university, That would be the rule. It's very clear.
Great, thank you. And one person was just asking if we might be able to go back to that resource slide.
Mm-hmm. This one?
I believe so. And one additional question about the loan program: can only Senate faculty join the loan program?
Yes. That is a system-wide program. And so unfortunately, we don't have any control locally on our campus.
Okay, and will the annual earnings limit threshold in U codes be adjusted to reflect the HSCP X increases that will take effect on October 1st?
No. The threshold increases are not driven by the scales. They're set by APM 670, which is in the APM, which is this system-wide set of policies right here. And it's something that we agree upon and is set by system-wide academic personnel, the Senate. It's a very in-depth vetting process. Those policies don't change annually.
Great. I think that covers a majority of our questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And if there are additional questions, feel free to, collect them, and I will try to answer them in some way that I can and get them back to you.
Excellent. Emerald, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.